With the latest agriculture news from across the state and nation, it's time for the AgNet News Hour from AgNet West. Here's your host, Brian German.
Good morning and happy Friday to everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the AgNet News Hour. Today we'll be hearing from our friend Aubrey Bettencourt about a recent trip to Washington, D.C. But first, some news from the California Farm Bureau Federation. It looks like rice farmers are expected to plant full acreage this season. Despite a storm stopping field work earlier in the month, rice farmers say they intend to plant all their acreage, with efforts well underway throughout the Sacramento Valley. Before the storm, California growers were projected to sow about 497,000 acres of rice this year. And taking a look at the ongoing Farm Bill discussion, an American Farm Bureau official says next week's House Farm Bill markup could be make or break it for the Farm Bill this year. AFBF's Director of Government Affairs, Joe Gilson, says it all comes down to getting both parties to support a farm bill in committee. Otherwise, a razor-thin GOP majority might lack the votes to pass it on the floor.
There's always going to be a few Republicans who just, disagree with anything the speaker is trying to do. And so you really need a bipartisan vote out of the Ag Committee to give Speaker Johnson the ability to bring it to the House floor.
Gilson says while Farm Bureaus encourage there is a markup, he can envision a partisan committee vote without changes to SNAP demanded by Democrats.
I could see something like that happening. The biggest outstanding factor right now is that nutrition program, which makes up over 80% of the Farm Bill.
Gilson freely admits it'll be hard for Democrats to support tighter SNAP requirements in an election year, but rural ones in tight races might need to.
Voting for farmers and ranchers in your district, that's good politics. Farmers and ranchers, they want to see an updated Farm Bill. Since last year when we had the 1-year extension, we need to see a 5-year Farm Bill in order to give us the certainty, the farm safety net in place.
And in other news, the U.S. Department of Agriculture has announced new efforts to help support the organic industry. Various initiatives, partnerships, grants, and additional funding worth $10 million are being made available to bolster the organic products market and aid producers transitioning to organic farming. The programs aim to develop new markets, provide training for transitioning producers, and alleviate financial burdens associated with organic certification. The initiatives, including the Organic Market Development Grant Program and partnerships with organizations like Oregon Tilth and the Organic Farming Research Foundation, seek to expand organic expertise, support research, and provide hands-on training. The Farm Service Agency's Organic Certification Cost Share Program is also offering financial assistance covering up to 75% of organic certification costs for eligible producers and handlers. And now here's Rod Bain with some insight on the 2022 Census of Agriculture.
The latest series of data sets associated with USDA's 2022 Census of Agriculture are now available, looking at data points by congressional districts. Information ranges from number of farms to producer characteristics. Among those studying these data breakdowns, Roger Cryan, Chief Economist of the American Farm Bureau Federation.
It's always helpful to know who the farmers are, where they are. It helps us demonstrate to senators and members of Congress who they're representing and give them some indication of the problems those folks are facing so that they can better understand the ways that they can help those constituents and help those folks keep the rest of us well-fed, clothed, and fueled.
The full Ag Census report is available online at www.nass.usda.gov/ag census. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
Thanks, Rod. And according to some new data from the Association of Equipment Manufacturers, sales of four-wheel drive tractors increased 24% in April compared to 2023. Year-to-date figures show that four-wheel drive tractor sales are up 1.9% in the U.S. Similarly, sales of 100-plus horsepower tractors rose by 7.2% year-over-year in April, continuing the upward trend from March and February. AEM Senior Vice President Kurt Blades attributed the modest growth in four-wheel drive tractor sales to the resilience of the agricultural industry. However, he also noted challenges in the smaller horsepower market. In Canada, combine sales skyrocketed by 73.5% in April, while four-wheel drive tractor sales grew by 7.2%. More detailed reports are available on the AEM Market Share Statistics webpage. You're listening to the AgNet News Hour from AgNet West. I'm your host, Brian German, and we've got more of the day's agriculture news right now.
The Be Sure campaign from the Growing Matters Coalition helps growers protect bees and other wildlife. Today we're talking with Shine Taylor, Field Development Representative with Gowan Company. So tell me, what are some quick tips that farmers and applicators can follow?
We always start with the label. If somebody gives me a call and asks me a question, usually I refer back to that label because all the pertinent information that could be about that product or how that product's used is written somewhere on that label. And it just takes a few minutes to read and digest those things. But then once we get past the reading of the label, it's the application of that label and how we use that product. So using our knowledge of agronomics, of what that crop stage is, what the pests are doing, what's going on in the field, and apply what we know as agriculturalists to something, like a label and how we use a product in a biological sense. So we kind of have to merge those two together.
Learn more online at growingmatters.org/besure. Brought to you by the Growing Matters Coalition. I'm Sabrina Halverson.
Food price inflation is continuing its stabilization. Numbers for food price inflation in April have recently come out. USDA's Gary Crawford reports.
Some more good news for food shoppers. The latest consumer price index numbers are out there for April. They show grocery store food prices last month rising at an almost imperceptible 0.1%.
So over the past few months, we've seen food price inflation that's lower than the long-term average.
And Agriculture Department economist Megan Schweitzer says grocery store food prices are on average only about 1% higher than April a year ago.
We've really seen inflation for food at home, for groceries, stabilize over the past few months. Prices increased by 0.1% in April, following up March, which showed no change, and February, which also showed a very small increase of 0.1%.
Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
I'm Will Jordan for AgNet West.
Thanks, Will. And we recently caught up with Jaspreet Sidhu, Vegetable Crops Advisor for Kern County. And today we're talking about some of the information that you had highlighted a couple weeks back now at the Carrot Research Symposium. So let's just kind of start with what some of the updates were for some of your carrot projects down there.
Sure. So every year we conduct this annual research symposium, and this year it was in March. And then we had a total of 9 presentations, 7 from the researchers funded by the Carrot Board, and 2 were guest speakers. And it was a well-attended event with close to 125 registrants. And at the symposium, we covered a range of topics discussing about pest management, carrot breeding, produce safety and agricultural water, nitrogen and irrigation management for sustainable carrot production in the valley. And I began with my presentation where I provided an overview of all the trials we conducted here in the valley, such as nematicide screening, the alternaria, and herbicide trials. Then we had a couple talks on the topic of plant breeding, carrot breeding. Phil Simon from USDA, Mary Ruth McDonald from the University of Gulf, Canada, and Phil Roberts from UC Riverside. They provided overview on the progress in carrot breeding for alternaria, cavity spot, and nematode-resistant varieties. Then we had Steve Fenimore. He discussed the prospects of stem disinfestation on managing weed seed banks in carrot production. And as far as I remember, he also shared details on the commercial scale steam applicator that he is modifying or customizing for the carrot production. And it's in Arizona, it's being built up. So he showed the prototype and some details on that. We had a researcher from University of Florida, Dr. Matthew Parrott. He discussed about the fungicide efficacy study that he did in Florida on managing alternaria leaf blight, where they looked at the efficacy when the fungicides were applied through solid set sprinklers. Linda Harris from UC Davis, she discussed on the produce safety and the proposed revisions to the agricultural water. And then another guest speaker, Ken Miller, he provided updates or he talked about the nitrogen management and how to improve the nitrogen use efficiency in carrots. And he also talked about the regulatory targets set for groundwater quality protection and the challenges to agricultural industry in general. Those were briefly about the talks, and key takeaways that were from the symposium were like, we do have some resistance for cavity spot in carrots, And we did some trials in Canada and here in California, and those results were quite identical. Steam helps in managing certain weed species and also soil-borne pathogens based on Steve Fennemore's results. 3 fungicides, Fentalis, Marivon, and Marivis Prime, they were very effective in managing alternaria leaf blight. And non-fumigant nematicides they're still not registered, but they are effective in reducing nematode damage in carrots. And I have also posted the presentations and the recording of the symposium on my website, which is UCCE Kern Vegetable Crops Pest Management.
I was curious in terms of some of you touched on a little bit of some of the research updates, but aside from, some of the resistance that's being identified and some of the nematicides, if we could get into maybe some of the key points of those research updates that might be beneficial to know about or keep an eye on of what's coming out there.
Yes. So next step we will be doing the steam infestation trials here in the valley, which I think I will be having a demonstration, which the growers are very much interested in looking at it. Fentalis, as I mentioned, Fentalis the fungicide, Marivon, and Miravis Prime, they were very effective in managing alternaria leaf blight, which is a huge issue for our carrot industry. Non-fumigant nematicides, they are effective. They're not yet registered, but we are pushing for the registration, and hopefully we will have a Celebro, which is from Cativa. It is registered in other states, but we are hoping for a registration soon in California. So those are the key points that the stakeholders should be on the lookout.
Well, very cool. And just lastly here, I saw the update and wanted to give you an opportunity to plug the upcoming Kern County potato variety trial field day. So what's kind of the ins and outs of that event this year?
Yes, so that's a regular potato variety field day, which we conducted mid-June to third week of June every year. This year it will be on June 12th, and we will be showcasing our varieties from this year, the early maturing varieties, different kinds of specialties, reds, coloreds, and russet potatoes that we will be showcasing at the trial. And growers will be able to see how they performed in the field, depending on the size, yields, and their performance based on the skin setting.
You're listening to the AgNet News Hour from AgNet West. I'm your host, Brian German, and with today's agricultural law and tax report, here's Roger McOwen.
A constant struggle for farmers is the battle with weeds. Every state has a noxious weed list that requires the listed weeds to be controlled. If they aren't, some type of penalty might apply. Weeds that aren't on the list need not be controlled, but they can present their own legal issues. Every state has a noxious weed statute that lists the noxious weeds or other vegetation subject to regulation and establishes a mechanism for control. Most state noxious weed laws and regulations provide that weed control officials may assess the cost of removing weeds to the property owner rather than a tenant or someone else that is in possession of the premises. Some state laws also impose criminal penalties for violations. For weeds that aren't on the state noxious weed list, you generally cannot recover damages against another party for spread of non-noxious weeds unless the weeds constitute a nuisance or were willfully allowed to occur with the specific intent to damage your property. But if a neighbor negligently controls weeds and damages your property as a result, you can recover for your loss. A North Dakota case made that point. But outside those specific situations, there's no duty to control non-noxious weeds. Do you know the weeds that are on your state's noxious weed list? If not, it might be time to read up. This has been the Agricultural Law and Tax Report. I'm Roger McOwen.
What is happening on the prevention and education front for both animal and human health regarding the H5N1 strain of highly pathogenic avian influenza found in lactating dairy cattle in 9 states? Federal partners in this response effort recently provided an update. This is Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack.
Increased testing, surveillance, and additional measures are underway to protect both human and animal health. At this stage, there's no concern about the safety of the commercial milk supply or beef supply. We continue to see affected cows recover with supportive treatment, with little associated mortality being reported. And it's also important to note that thus far we have found no changes significantly in the virus that would make it more transmissible to humans.
And as testing, study, and data collection continues regarding this particular H5N1 outbreak,
USDA remains committed to evolving its response and course of action. The more we know informs what we do, and we want to make sure that we're doing what is necessary to provide producers on the ground with the most available and most scientific information and direction.
Public concern about the safety of milk and dairy products was also addressed by Health and Human Services Secretary Xavier Becerra.
The risk to the public from this outbreak remains low. All the scientific knowledge and data we've been able to collect to date supports the continued safety of the milk supply.
He explains USDA and the Food and Drug Administration
continue testing for H5N1 in retail milk and dairy supplies. We are working across the country to do this. That helps ensure the safety of the commercial pasteurized milk supply.
FDA is also providing an additional $8 million to fund ongoing and expanded response, including validation of milk pasteurization criteria, surveillance at different points of the milk production system, increasing lab capacity and training on biosecurity measures, and partnerships with states on milk safety and universities on research. In addition,
we've identified $93 million to be used by CDC to expand our monitoring of people exposed to infected animals, to scale up our testing and analysis capabilities, to determine whether candidate vaccines are effective, and to manufacture, store, and distribute additional influenza diagnostic kits.
Other measures enacted or being enacted include
CDC continues to have ongoing discussions with multiple states about field investigations. We've reached out to representatives of the dairy workforce to try to make sure that we encourage participation of workers in trying to track the virus and the outbreak. NIH is providing scientific support to this entire effort through its U.S.-based Centers for Excellence for Influenza Research and Response, known as CEERS.
I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
Thanks, Rod. And in other news from the California Farm Bureau Federation, Ventura County cabbage growers and researchers are targeting diamondback moth. Despite having wings, a diamondback moth isn't much of a flyer. However, it hasn't stopped it from spreading across Ventura County, where cabbage is in the ground much of the year. California is the nation's top producer of cabbage, with Ventura and Santa Barbara counties leading the state. The region's also ground zero for the diamondback moth, which is attracted to leafy plants in the brassica family. With an uptick in crop damage, researchers are now studying new integrated pest management approaches to deal with the pest, which is becoming resistant to common insecticides. This is the AgNet News Hour from AgNet West. We've got an excerpt from an episode of the Voices of the Valley podcast highlighting cross-border healthcare and the role it plays in providing accessible and high-quality medical services for agricultural workers.
Hello, this is Michelle Rivera, Communications Manager with Western Growers.
Hi, this is Raquel Lugo, Senior Director of Client Services and Mexico Operations for Western Growers Assurance Trust.
Thanks for joining us, Raquel. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thanks for having me.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about your role at WGAT?
Well, I do a little bit of everything. Primarily, I oversee client services for Western Growers Assurance Trust, so that means that I oversee the client service representatives and their supervisor, but then I also manage a network of providers across the border. So that's our Mexico program. The Mexico program was created in the mid-'80s to address the needs of the farm worker community.
And that number continues to grow. And in terms of cost savings, Americans can save an estimated 40 to 60% across the most common major medical procedures in Mexico. Now, is that what you're seeing for our field workers?
Absolutely. That's what I'm seeing across the border as well. The farm worker community currently, well, not only the farm worker community, but everyone that accesses our program today can actually take advantage of zero copays. So for the member accessing services, it's very, very affordable. For the trust, this is also very affordable because we have very competitive rates when compared to the U.S.
And now, other than affordability, because that is a huge, huge deal, what benefits does the Mexico cross-border program offer farm workers seeking medical care?
Access. So people receiving services across the border can walk in to an office consultation, and I'm talking general practice. They can get a specialty care appointment within a week instead of waiting 3 to 4 weeks like we do in the States. Something else that is very popular is our 24-hour service. So people can access services at any time during the day, 24/7. at our contracted facilities. And that includes, of course, general practice and pharmacy. Something else that we've done that is working really, really well with our contracted facilities is that we're creating these one-stop shops. So when you go across the border to the contracted facility, you don't just access general practice and pharmacy. You can access radiology, imaging, lab, specialty care, cardiology units, so stress test, bone density scans, you name it, all under one roof. So again, accessibility, affordability, all in your language. That's why it's so popular.
Well, that's great. And I actually had the opportunity to join you and visit one of these facilities a few weeks ago in San Luis. And, I was actually extremely surprised at how organized, how beautiful these facilities were. I was expecting just, a regular modern, medical facility like we have here in the States. But I feel like what I stepped into was kind of like a 5-star hotel of medical facilities. But I went in there and, I got shown around. I got the whole general checkup. I got my blood work done. And I see what you're saying about a one-stop shop where everything was done in-house. I got my results a couple hours later. So I was really impressed with what they have going on down there.
I'm glad you feel that way. I was very involved with this new building that you visited last week, as well as any other provider. But the reason why we're so involved is because we want to make sure that our member experience is superb. So it's not just crossing the border to access services, it's crossing the border to access the services that these people have earned with their hard work. And I think we're there. Again, people get quality care at no cost currently, except for their prescription copay. But for the trust, what that means is that they're offering quality care at a fraction of the price that we are paying here in the United States. And like you said, in many cases, in much better facilities, we have excellent physicians across the border. And so it's very comparable to stateside benefits.
Now, I want to ask you about yourself without getting too personal. I know you live in the States, you're in Yuma. And you shared with me that you go down and cross the border and receive your medical services there, right?
I do, and I've been doing it for over 20 years, my son and I. And so it just makes sense, right? I am 20 minutes away from the border. It's just easy for me. So if I'm not feeling well, I call in, I say, I'm going across the border, I'll be right back. And that's exactly what happens. I go across the border, I get checked out, I get meds, and I'm back to work the same day. So that may not be the experience for everyone, right? But my experience is, again, easy, accessible, quick, and back to work.
And now I understand you play a huge role in building, fostering, and maintaining relationships with these providers in Mexico. What considerations are taking into account when you're selecting healthcare providers to work with?
We talked a little bit about this last week, right? I haven't hired a new provider in a while. Why is that? And I've been here for 29 years. So 29 years ago, we had a lot less providers. Our network was a lot more narrow. Today, the network has expanded. However, we have allowed to have our loyal contracted providers expand within their business rather than just hiring the whole city. Why do we do that? These are people that we trust, that, again, have been loyal to us. They have learned our way of treating our people. So their customer service that they provide, again, going back to that customer experience, they understand what we're trying to accomplish, which is not just offer an office visit, but really create this patient-physician bond so that the people, again, feel seen and that they feel that they are getting the care that they deserve and they have earned.
Now, I know a lot of people may have some concerns about crossing the border. For myself, I was with you, and I know you've been back and forth across the border a lot, and it was my first experience crossing the border. So how do you ensure the safety and quality of health services provided when people are crossing the border, especially for the first time?
Well, let me start by saying this. For the most part, people that are accessing services are used to crossing the border because they either live across the border or they live on the border town. So crossing the border is something that just comes natural. But I could see the concern for someone that's never crossed the border like yourself. There's this perception about Mexico that couldn't be more wrong, if you will. And while border cities are not beautiful like, tourist cities, they're really very safe places. Why? Because we take care of people that come and spend their US dollars across the border. And so when we crossed, you saw that it's very different. So at the very beginning, it's very shocking, right? Even in a border town on the States and then crossing to Mexico, there is that cultural shock, if you will. But once you were in our facilities, you found that it was, again, very comparable to the States. The customer service was good. And again, just all the hard work that we've put into that patient experience or member experience, if you will, has paid off.
This is the AgNet News Hour, and I'm your host, Brian German. We'll be back in just a moment with more agriculture news. Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour from AgNet West. I had the opportunity to speak with our friend Aubrey Bettencourt last week about her new role in the ag industry and where she'll be putting her experience and expertise to work.
My name is Aubrey Bettencourt, and I am the Global Director of Government Relations and External Affairs for NetFM, Orbia's precision agricultural company.
And friend of the show, we've spoke to you multiple times in multiple different arenas, and now this is something new. And so what's going to be your role here, and what's the outlook look like?
Yeah, it's definitely a new position. It's an exciting adventure. So I will be tasked with leading the advocacy and engagement efforts around strategic policy development and programmatic development to support the mission of NetFM, which is to continue to support our farmers through innovative irrigation technology to address a myriad of issues that we're facing our farmers, not just water scarcity, but nutrient management and so many other things through this. So I'll be directing and coordinating our local, state, federal, and even international as we look at other markets around the world, as NetFM is the largest irrigation company in the world, as well as the oldest drip irrigation company in the world. A great footprint all over, whether we're talking about the United States, the Americas, India, Middle East, obviously, and Europe, even parts of Africa. So a lot to start to coordinate, but ultimately it is to create a coordinated effort to support the mission of the company, which is supporting our farmers with these technologies, making them affordable and available through policy influence, programmatic support, and advocacy at every level.
And part of this, you're actually currently in Washington, D.C. for an event. What has this event been like, and what's the purpose, and what have you kind of garnered from the week out there?
Sure. So we were part of the Ag on the Mall event here at with the Ag Equipment Manufacturers Association was our host. We're part of the water division lead on that. Again, speaking to NetFM's extensive history and experience that it brings to the table. We're partners in a lot of these organizations or leaders in a lot of these organizations. And so we were there representing irrigation technology, not only, our conservation and water resource management side, but also nutrient management side. And what we're finding with this technology is it's ever evolving for a new age. We're able to adapt this incredibly powerful tool that we've had in our toolkit, especially in Western water, particularly in California, but we're able to adapt this tool in the toolkit for so many more applications that are addressing other issues. I mentioned it a little bit ago with nutrient management, partnering with dairy and other animal agriculture for our subsurface drip irrigation effluent program, where we're actually able to fully recycle and utilize and go direct to root zone with this organic fertilizer that comes straight off of an existing source, helps with nutrient management requirements for them, but also doing direct to root zone controlled application. So we're applying the right food at the right time in the right place, and we're stretching that drop of water even further for what it can do at the plant. And that's now gaining traction, not just in California, but we have applications of that in Oregon and Washington, and we want to see that applied nationwide. So a lot of what this has been really helping decision makers here in DC, whether we're talking about folks at different agencies, USDA, EPA, and others, or members on the Hill, really looking at, hey, you know us for this one thing, but look what else we're doing, and really expanding their minds and their scope of understanding that this is actually an incredible tool for addressing the challenges that are facing our farmers, as well as our natural resource management beyond just water, and really helping to have them have a better understanding of how we're out there leaning in with our experience and expertise to help solve these problems uniquely in every situation. And we can do that with the versatility of the tech as well. And so a lot of it has been education, but it's education that comes with, hey, policy, we talk about this how many times, Brian? Policies have to evolve as our technology evolves, as our challenges change, as our metrics are changing. And so we're working that message as well. Hey, we need policies to open up. We need programs to allow for more accessibility to this for our farmers, for affordability for our farmers. Because at the end of the day, and what I so appreciate about Netafim and Orbia leaning into this role and developing this out, is they are willing to take now this 60 plus years of experience, expertise, knowledge, and investment that they have, and that they've been going direct to our farmers and helping them in the ground. But now they're willing to take this to the influential spaces in policy and program and regulatory in order to say, no, we need to be part of the bigger solutions here too, and bring all of our resources to bear so that we're making sure that we're keeping our farmers farming, that they are profitable, that they are sustainable, and that these amazing tools are available to them so that they can remain that way for a changing world.
And we're going to take a quick break here and come back and continue our conversation with Aubrey Bettencourt. You're listening to the AgNet News Hour from AgNet West Radio Network. I've seen some of the pictures and some of the media coverage of this event, and with lawmakers running around and other decision makers stopping by and talking, it seems like having those conversations is extremely important, because I think everyone in California knows the importance of water, the importance of conservation, but what's the importance of having that conversation at a more national level to see maybe some of the influences or advancements made in California, and maybe applying that nationally to really help bolster and support farmers getting more with the resources they have?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, gotta love California early adopters, and will continue to adopt. And if anything, California, as we always have said, right, so go California, so goes the nation. Well, in this instance, this is actually a big positive. And California is driving these changes because we have, these challenges, sometimes regulatory, sometimes natural, and has been such a partner with the industry, or with Netafim and others to develop the solutions here. So now California can export these solutions and can export these approaches to the rest of the country, and even to the rest of the world in some ways. Subsurface drip on alfalfa. Here I come from almonds, which got a bad rap for water use, of course, which we have dispelled. And because almonds have been an incredible adapter of these types of technology, increasing their efficiency, increasing their productivity on the same resource footprint, applying that to other crops, applying that to other regions, is really a big drive and focus now. And if we can do it in almonds, we definitely can do it with alfalfa and other things. And so, you're looking at various challenges around the West, particularly when it comes to water supply. So definitely a place that more education, more exposure to this type of farming. We talk about it in so many ways, right? What got us here doesn't necessarily going to get us there. We can work through this and remain profitable, and we should demand to do that. We also should demand that we have the resources and technology made available to us to be able to do that. And that's definitely an approach that we're coming to Washington with, and helping. And it's really fun to take, a California legislator who's very familiar with this and pair them with a legislator from Arkansas, North Carolina, Arizona, Utah, who else do we be, Iowa, and say, okay, let's look at your challenges. Here's what we're doing in California. What's going on with your growers in your region? And here's how we've used these tools to do this. Okay, what would it take to get this adoption? What would it take to get this education out there? And partnering with our agencies, USDA and NRCS, they've, especially NRCS, we know they've got a lot of money to spend, and they've got to be making sure that they're addressing resource concerns. Being able to sit with them and crosswalk and say, okay, well, here, what are the concerns? Do we have a tool that can help us with that? Right? How do we work together to communicate this? How do we make sure that this is easy for farmers to access? And these are a lot of the things that we're working through. And like I said, it's an exciting, I think, new step for Netafim and Orbia. And it's been really well received since we've been here this week.
Very cool. And just lastly here, I know you're new in this new position, but in terms of looking to the future and looking forward, what are maybe some of the low-hanging fruit or initiatives or things that are going to be some of the first items that you're going to be looking at or tackling now here?
Well, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about a farm bill. There's a lot of movement back and forth on the House and the Senate. The next 2 weeks are going to reveal a lot to us in terms of what happens. But I stay mindful of, we know we're in an election year. If something cannot be negotiated here by the end of June, that's going to change a lot of the tone of the farm bill. But we're seeing drafts and summaries and more details starting to come out from both sides, both parties and both houses right now. A lot of ball game left. We're going to continue to work the farm bill because that's where a lot of these dollars that support our farmers' access to these programs, particularly in places that they don't normally access them, but also in places that they do. California, I believe, is the largest EQIP state, and it's predominantly used for this. It's predominantly used for investments in irrigation technology. So these are important things to get back to our farmers. We want to make sure we're staying supportive in that space. But we have some things internally, with the departments, same thing, right? If the money's there, but the avenue or the regs are not modernized in a way to support the intention of the money or to support the intention of expanding the application of the technology, for instance, the SDIE technology, we got to be working with the agency to help them through some of their reg reviews in that process. And so I'm a USDA alum. I love sitting down with them and saying, all right, how can we work on this together? What do we need to do together here? And what are you trying to address? How can we help you do that? And so getting into the mix with them is very helpful. And they've been very welcoming to us. And I appreciate always the willingness of the USDA teams to engage with us in that. And so I would say those are kind of our low hanging fruit for now, is really that reg modernization. And then, we're in the silly season. So there's also some things going on at the state levels in some of our priority states, whether we're talking about California or Arizona. We're definitely, again, keeping an eye on some things in the Midwest. We've got some pilot projects out in the East. We're all over the place. And we have a lot of opportunity to continue to, again, demonstrate that we have this expertise, we have this experience, we can bring it to bear in new applications in new ways. And we're excited to demonstrate that. And if anybody listening, is interested in these technologies or interested in the programs to help put these technologies in, I really encourage them to reach out to their local irrigation dealer. I mean, again, Netafim is a global company, and our dealer network is incredibly important to us. But they can reach out to Netafim directly. Netafim is also the only irrigation company that has agronomists on staff to help you design a program that works for you. So I would just say, please reach out to us and work with folks on our team in the field to help get you what you need and see what your options are. And more to come from us as we make sure that we also are providing you with good resources to find resources to be able to implement these technologies as well.
To get more information on the topics you heard today, visit AgNet West online at agnetwest.com. You can also stay connected by following us on our social media at AgNet West on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also find our broadcast team of Brian German and Sabrina Halverson on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you for listening to the AgNet News Hour from AgNet West. AgNet West Radio Network, your primary choice for agriculture news.